Saturday morning, it's Right On SC. Casey and Rex in the studio with you. Today we're talking about sports just in time for March Madness. Today's episode for the radio show, we're getting ready to go on the air here in just a minute, is going to be about the drama that sports can add to a story. And so I started looking up all these sports stories. I'm like, man, I really have not read any sports stories.
Really?
Like here I thought like, yeah, this will be an easy one for me. But these lists, we have 2 lists of novels in the show notes. They're out on the blog at rightonsc.blog. And the 2 lists, I've read like 3 books off of these 2 lists. But what I did realize was the books that I've been reading are more like nonfiction. They're like creative nonfiction. So we're talking a little bit about that because Friday Night Lights is one of those. The Blind Side is one of those. Seabiscuit is one of those. So we'll talk about those. I'm familiar with those books. So we're talking about that. And then really it's about the natural drama that sports can add to your story. That's the whole topic of the show. So last night, Clemson lost in the 3rd round of the ACC tournament. Tonight is the final for the ACC tournament. So they lost in the semifinals. And it's now going into March Madness. So next week, the big NCAA tournament will begin, and we'll start to see Cinderella stories and all these kinds of things that come around as part of that sports narrative. So my first job out of college was as a sports writer. And I like a sports story. I like the kind of natural drama that's involved in that. I don't know if
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, sorry. I like the natural drama of the sports story. So I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to talk. Well, there is an opportunity. We're going to talk more about that. Do you read sports stories?
I have.
Yeah.
On occasion. I read the Abysmal Brute by Jack London, I think.
It's about boxing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, you knew that.
Yeah.
Very good. It's the first boxing story ever written.
Yeah. Not surprised. The word brute is always associated with boxing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's of all the sports. Yeah, it's most I should say it's most frequently associated with boxing. Maybe that's sort of an interesting tangent. This might end up being a 2-for episode because as I started thinking about it, like sports offers a lot to talk about. But the adjectives in terms of like how we describe these sports, there's things like the beautiful game. The beautiful game is soccer, right? I mean.
Right.
I don't know why it's beautiful, but apparently it's beautiful, right? So, yeah, I don't know. What any other sports books that you read that you could think of?
I've got one I'm going to be reading soon. It's called Dreaming Baseball.
Okay.
By James T. Farrell.
Okay.
Who you haven't heard of, right?
No.
His most famous work was Studs Lonigan. This was a book that he wrote towards the end of his life, and he couldn't find a publisher for. So it lay dormant for about 30 years and didn't get published until 2012.
Okay.
And I picked up a copy of that recently.
All right.
But you got to look at what kind of book is it. I mean, how important is the sport in the story?
I was about to say that it's like that Christmas story conversation where like, is it just that it takes place at Christmas or is this about the spirit of Christmas? So is it just that sports are sort of a backdrop to this, or is it that the sports are the story itself? So that'd be an interesting conversation to have on the air. And then the other thing I was thinking about was it's a little bit like the war episode, which is what we ran last week. So those of you that were listening last week, I'm sorry that we missed the first 2 segments, but they were able to get the war episode on for the last 2 segments of the show.
Anyway, so it was
she didn't remember the war episode?
No, she didn't remember anything.
Well, it's on the podcast now.
Senile.
The war episode, we played it in August, so it's now up on the podcast too. So those patrons that are watching, you can access all of these back episodes from the podcast too. So, all right, we're going to go on the air here in just a minute. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the show. Like I said, today's episode is about sports in your fiction and what that looks like. So this should be fun. Have a great rest of your Saturday.